Kid Scientist. True Tales of Childhood from Science Superstars. Stories by David Stabler. Illustrations by Anusha Schnad. Today, we're not going to read the entire book because that would take a really long time. Today, we will read about one individual, Vera Rubin, Galaxy Girl. Does the universe spin? If so, how fast? A lifelong fascination with the stars led future astronomer Vera Rubin to search for the answers to these questions, which she first contemplated while gazing through a homemade telescope in her childhood bedroom. I became an astronomer because of looking at the sky, Vera Rubin once said. More than books, more than teachers, it was her own sense of wonder that made Vera want to study the stars when she grew up. But before she could do that, she had to overcome the doubts of people on her journey to becoming one of the pioneering women in her field. Vera Rubin was born Vera Florence Cooper on July 23, 1928, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her older sister Ruth was her closest friend. Vera's parents, Rose and Philip Cooper, worked for the Bell Telephone Company in Philadelphia. Rose calculated the mileage for private phone lines. Philip was an electrical engineer. When she was a little girl, Vera's parents took her to the Morse School of Engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. Among the science exhibits on display was a device called the Van de Graaff generator. It was a large aluminum ball mounted on a pedestal that generates static electricity. When Vera touched the ball, something unexpected happened. Blue sparks shot out of it, and her hair stood on end. This certainly is a hair-raising experience. Bzz, bzz, bzz. A short time later, Vera visited another Philadelphia landmark, the Franklin Institute. This science museum and education center is named for Benjamin Franklin, one of the city's most famous residents. Vera was quickly dazzled by the Institute's walk-in kaleidoscope, a chamber of mirrors and colored lights that made her feel like she was on another planet. Vera began to think about how the kaleidoscope worked. She decided to build her very own using everyday household materials. When she got home, she searched the kitchen for a metal tube and found an icing squeezer, which her mother used to frost cakes. Then Vera cut out 3 pieces of polished glass and glued them inside the cylinder. These would serve as the interior reflectors. When she held up her creation up to the light, it was an instant kaleidoscope. It wasn't the most spectacular light show she'd ever seen, but it worked. It's almost like seeing unseen forces at work in the universe. When Vera was 10 years old, her family moved to Washington, D.C. for her father's job. Because space was limited in their new home, Vera and Ruth shared a bedroom and a double bed, which neither sister was happy about. To maintain their privacy, the girls drew an imaginary line down the center of the mattress. Vera's half of the bed faced the window. Beyond it was the northern sky. From this little window, porch, as she called it, Vera could gaze up at the stars as they traced their course across the night sky. She became mesmerized by the constellations. She soon discovered that she could tell time by the movement of the stars and get a sense of the motion of the earth as well. Sometimes, Vera saw meteors streaking through the inky blackness. During these showers caused by space rocks, meteoroids orbiting the sun, she would stay up all night to observe the shooting stars. Though her mother would scold her, for the most part, Vera's parents allowed their daughter to pursue her new hobby. "Vera, go to bed." While watching these spectacular celestial events, Vera memorized the path of each meteor trail. In the morning, she would draw a map and record all of her observations. After a few months of stargazing with the naked eye, Vera decided that she needed a telescope to help her see more clearly. But telescopes are expensive. The most she could afford to buy was a telescope lens. The rest, she decided, she would have to build herself. So, Vera took a bus downtown and went to a store that sold linoleum flooring. She persuaded the manager to let her have one of the cardboard tubes the linoleum came rolled on. Then, with the help from her dad, she fixed the lens to one end of the tube and looked through it. Her homemade telescope wasn't the best, but it was the best she could do with the materials on hand. "Oh, Dad, it's perfect!" When Vera was 14, she asked her father to take her to a meeting of the local amateur astronomer club. There, she listened to a lecture by a famous astronomer named Harlow Shapley, who had used his observations of the motions of stars to estimate the size of the Milky Way galaxy. The lecture helped convince Vera that astronomy could be more than just a hobby. Someday, it might be her career. From then on, she and her father attended the club's monthly meetings. Vera also started borrowing astronomy books from the library and told a family friend, Goldie Goldberg, about her interest in the stars. One night, Goldie and her husband drove Vera and her sister to Virginia in their convertible car. With the car's roof open to the sky, they gazed up at the stars. Goldie taught Vera the names of the constellations, which Vera had never heard before. Ursa Major, Orion, Pegasus, and more. "And what's that one?" "Ursa Major." Goldie also told Vera about her own girlhood science-related dreams. She had wanted to become an engineer, but at the time the University of Pennsylvania did not admit women to its engineering school, so she had to get a teaching degree instead. For the first time, Vera realized that there might be obstacles on her way to becoming an astronomer. University of Pennsylvania, positively no admittance for girls. In high school, Vera continued to study astronomy any way she could. For her assignments, no matter what the subject, she tried to choose topics related to stars, space, or the universe. By the time she graduated, Vera knew exactly what she wanted to study in college. Her good grades earned her scholarships at several schools. Now she just had to decide which one to attend. At first, Vera considered Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, but the admissions officer there suggested that she take up a more ladylike career, such as painting the stars and planets instead of studying them. After that experience, whenever someone placed an obstacle in Vera's way, she would call a family member and joke, So, have you ever thought about going into painting instead? I think this is more your speed. Despite a lack of encouragement, Vera refused to let people's unfair and old-fashioned opinions about girls studying science stop her from pursuing her dream. Vera also earned admission to Vassar, an all-women's college in New York. If she attended Vassar, she would have the opportunity to study Maria Mitchell, America's most prominent female astronomer. Vera thought Vassar was the right choice for her, but when she showed her high school physics teacher the acceptance letter, he simply dismissed her choice. As long as you stay away from science, you should be all right, he said. Yeah, we'll see about that. Ha! Vera didn't listen to his advice, and in the fall of 1945, she left home for Vassar. 4 years later, she became the only member of her class, male or female, to graduate with a degree in astronomy. Vera moved back to Washington, D.C. with her husband, Bob Rubin, a chemistry student she had met on a summer break. She continued to work, teach, and study the stars until her death in 2016 at age 88. Among her many scientific breakthroughs, Vera developed a theory that galaxies spin the same way as solar systems do, and that an unseen force called dark matter governs the movements of the universe. At first, many of Vera Rubin's ideas were considered controversial, but over time, other scientists have come to understand that she was right. She was right all along. If astronomers are still using my data years from now, that's my greatest accomplishment, she once said. Whether or not they agree with her findings, astronomers the world over owe an enormous debt to a woman who opened the field to new voices and new ideas.